Kirby Air Riders has been out for over a month, and my life has not been the same. The game holds the rare privilege of being one of the few recent Nintendo titles untouched by any major controversies. The only thing people criticized Air Riders for is getting too much advertising with 2 dedicated directs. Not even Bonanza could escape the backlash with pricey DLC, which ended up slightly tarnishing its previously spotless reputation. As a result, Air Riders stands as a beacon of hope at a time when Nintendo seems to be actively researching new ways to stir controversy. It honors the legacy of the original Air Ride while being genuinely enjoyed by nearly every fan. As a follower of the series, you always want a franchise to thrive, and that's exactly why Air Rider's commercial success doesn't matter at all. What really matters is my dedicated sponsor for this video, My Machine. Although I don't get paid to advertise Air Rider's slightly overlooked machine customization feature, it still managed to swallow half of my total playtime. For this round, Ride with Beta Bike from the amazing Mirror, which I falsely called Beta Star, although it's based on a bike-like machine. Apologies for being such a fake fan. As dedicated fans of certain IPs, we tend to have this strange obsession with sales numbers. A positive market performance presumably leads to more successors, which is why we closely follow the retail figures of beloved titles. However, with all of Nintendo's current backlashes, Air Riders faces a clear problem. No matter how promising the game may look, there's a growing group of players who refuse to support Nintendo titles on principle, regardless of their apparent quality. I'm not here to judge whether that stance is right or wrong, but the sour taste left by recent business decisions undeniably affects potential customers, which is especially unfortunate for rather niche, passionate projects like Air Riders. Despite carrying the Kirby moniker and boasting an apparently high production value, it's still a spin-off sequel to a game that originally reviewed poorly and sold fine. Therefore, Air Riders doesn't seem to exist primarily for financial gain, but rather to please a small, dedicated group of fans, while quietly reinforcing the Kirby brand through strong secondary entries. Still, the game isn't just a potential victim of Nintendo's recent reputational issues, it's also hindered by generous strategic choices. Regardless of how players feel about Nintendo's corporate strategies, Mario Kart World exists, and it launched just 6 months earlier alongside the Switch 2. While longtime Kirby fans know that racing isn't Air Rider's main appeal, many casual players or those outside the fandom will glance at it and see just another kart racer. And when presented with 2 options, the average customer is always going to pick Mario Kart. Even Sakurai reportedly told Nintendo as much when they approached him with the idea, around the time he wrapped up work on Smash in 2021. Mario Kart World had already been in development since 2017, so Nintendo was fully aware of the overlapping genre. They might not have known back then that both games would release in the same year, but they had to at least recognize the possibility. Normally, Nintendo's very careful to avoid internal cannibalization, especially when it comes to releasing games that target similar audiences, so they were fully aware of the risk and likely prepared for a failure instead of an accident. It might sound odd to anticipate a flop, but that isn't so strange in the long term. As I mentioned, some games exist mainly to make a brand stronger, and if they are relatively successful on top, it's all the better. Then there is this other category, Sakurai games. It feels like Nintendo lets him do whatever he wants as long as it loosely aligns with their overall plans. His projects seem to operate without the same financial pressure, simply because everyone trusts he will deliver a competent end result. Kid Icarus Uprising sold reasonably well and it's still a fan favorite. Yet the silence since its release suggests there was never a serious plan to continue the series. Sakurai just happened to choose that particular franchise, without any long-term roadmap behind it. Obviously Nintendo didn't plan to create obvious controversy since they often lack plain self-awareness, but even with questionable decisions, Air Riders survived possible roadblocks. The Air Riders amiibo are surprisingly expensive, more so than your average figure. Where I come from, we measure inflation by the price of our local kebab, so I can tell you when things are getting expensive. If you plan to buy the game and collect every single one, you're almost spending the cost of the whole Switch 2. They are larger than usual and introduce a fun idea, swapping characters and machines. But that mechanic basically nudges you to buy at least 2, and regardless of what you think about that kind of corporate strategy, the strangest part is, since Air Riders release, I haven't seen a single person complain about the amiibo or even talk about them. When I play Air Riders, I completely forget the amiibo feature even exists. It just goes to show that if a game is compelling enough, it won't be dragged down by a few nitpicks because everything else holds up. In an ocean of divisive practices, Nintendo went ahead and revived a fan favorite that only a select few ever truly craved. With Sakurai having just wrapped up his work on Smash, this was a rare opportunity to create something different. Air Riders gives the Switch 2 an identity-defining title that isn't a remake, a port, or yet another continuation of a sub-series with 10 entries. Most importantly, it leaves a promising impression by actually listening to a niche fanbase, the kind that people in suits usually don't care about. There was never a massive outcry for Air Riders like there was for a traditional Paper Mario or Metroid when the remake of the Thousand Year Door was announced. There was always that lingering thought that maybe my devious little thumbs down actually made a difference. But with Air Riders, it came completely out of nowhere and ended up earning Nintendo a few unexpected brownie points. Air Riders was always a wish people like me hoped for, but no one seriously cried for it. We were not a vocal but calm minority. Air Ride fans just whispered please for the last 20 years. Regarding how Nintendo proposed the project, I wouldn't be surprised if they were ironically not even aware that many players desired a successor until Sakurai randomly confirmed their proposal. Kirby games are fun, innocent, and most of the time free from controversy. And in times where people are more sensitive than ever before, we need a title like this. Unfortunately, companies these days aren't satisfied with just reaching the break-even point for their games. They would much rather reach the break-even point in their customers' wallets. But since Nintendo's incredibly rich right now, they can afford to cope with an investment that doesn't necessarily return immediate profits. Long-term stabilization by building trust and binding fans to the prospect of similarly high-quality titles like Air Riders is just as important as short-term financial gain. Even if a game flops, there are other means to balance the loss. During the Wii U era, Amiibo practically saved a dying console and can subsidize the game's risk. There will be players buying every single Air Riders Amiibo, and they will make a huge difference in Nintendo's bank account. So even if Air Riders were considered a flop, Amiibo could cover the costs. Fans would see that Nintendo's listening and they would create brand goodwill. And if it sells well, they just revived a cult classic and gave the Switch 2 a unique hit. With all that theoretical ramble in mind, how was Air Riders actually selling? In its first week, the game reportedly sold 195,000 units, roughly 70,000 more than Bonanza. In comparison, the Forgotten Land debuted with 380,000 units, nearly double that amount. But the two are hard to compare. The Forgotten Land launched on an already established console, benefited from the hype of being the first proper 3D title in the series, and was a mainline entry. Air Riders on the other hand released during a highly competitive holiday period, just a few weeks after Age of Imprisonment and shortly before Metroid Prime 4. It also goes up against Mario Kart World and offers a more specialized gameplay experience that won't appeal to everyone. Considering all of that, it's actually a promising success and currently the best-selling spin-off in the series. Unless Air Riders becomes a long-term cash cow, Sakurai doesn't plan to follow up with a sequel. There will be no DLC and aside from a few minor in-game events, no ongoing updates to keep the game alive. With a few exceptions, Nintendo typically releases only one high-budget multiplayer title, like Mario Kart or Smash per console generation, and considering how long the Switch 1 has lasted, there is little reason to expect a Switch 3, let alone Air Ride 3 anytime soon. This is not a case where the financial success will guarantee the continuation of a series. If anything, the only reason Air Riders hopefully will become a commercial success is for the franchise itself. If Air Riders establishes itself as a resounding hit, it will directly help to benefit the series for greater ambitions. Kirby becomes more popular and more eyes will be on the upcoming next mainline entry. Spin-offs prove themselves to be rewarding endeavors and maybe we will see the return of high-quality side games like Epic Yarn or The Rainbow Curse. But even if not, it's not like the franchise is in dire need of more exposure. Air Riders' financial success doesn't matter whatsoever, because the fact that the game released at all is the real success for us players.